Today on the Videomaker podcast, we talk all about color. We talk color correction, color grading, working with raw footage, using LUTs, working with log, all of that good stuff. As always, if you listen to the podcast and you enjoy it, we would love it if you went to iTunes and gave us a 5-star review and hit the subscribe button. It's really, really helpful for new podcasts like ours. And if you're a Spotify user, do the same thing, but over there, I guess. So, with that out of the way, let's get on with the show. Welcome to the Videomaker podcast. I'm Mike Wilhelm, and with me, as always, to my right is Chris Monlux.
Hello.
And today, I was going to say the newest member of the Videomaker team, but actually the second newest member of the Videomaker team, Haley Laplante. Haley.
Hi.
This is her inaugural podcast.
That's right. So, Haley, this is like a training session for you, right? First time you've ever done this podcast.
Yes.
You directed this podcast, or any podcast.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. So Haley is our technical director today. She's going to monitor our video feeds and the audio feeds and maybe try some new sound effects that we have loaded up.
They're good. Mike picked out some good ones.
Haley, why don't you give us a taste here?
Play us the best one in your opinion.
Oh, this one.
Nice.
So we loaded these things up because, hey, the tool's got it. We should try it out.
Totally.
But it might be annoying, right? So I guess if you're watching this on YouTube, leave a comment telling us it's annoying if it is. Don't leave a comment on iTunes.
Yeah, don't review us and say that those are annoying, but you can give us a 5-star review. We'll take that, though.
That's right. And also Haley is our new managing editor. She is a wordsmith, and she's going to make sure that all of our graphics are looking good on our videos, and the text looks good on the website. And today, during the podcast, in addition to being our technical director, she's going to call us out on jargon, which is really something we're working on, right? Like sometimes we gloss over, these terms, which not everyone knows what they mean, and don't think about it. And Haley's going to make sure we say, stop. Define what that means.
And using jargon is not very inclusive. So our goal is to include more people into understanding what we're talking about. It's of course what people use to feel exclusive. So when you're a professional or whatever, you might want to use the jargon to make someone else not feel smart. But we're not trying to do that.
That's right. So something I learned about Haley recently, which I didn't expect, is what her favorite movie was. And before Haley, you tell everyone what your favorite movie is. We already know, but we can just try to guess what we thought it would have been.
Yeah, let's see here.
Can't wait to hear this. Okay.
Let's see here. I would say Nanook of the North, the very first documentary ever.
I would never have guessed that one.
No.
Have you seen Nanook of the North?
No, I've never even heard of that.
Okay,
it's a pseudo documentary.
I would have guessed Mean Girls.
Oh, man.
Am I right? Do you like Mean Girls?
I mean, it's funny. It's kind of like a classic, I guess, but no.
Well written. Tina Fey wrote that.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so what is it?
My favorite movie is Braveheart. It's been ever since the first time I saw it. Became my favorite movie.
How long is Braveheart? It's a long movie, isn't it?
It's like over 2 hours, I believe. Yeah, 2.5.
I think it's 3.
3.
When I was a kid, you I'm sure had never experienced this. When you rent Braveheart, it comes in the big box.
Oh yeah, it came with two VHSs. That's right. I remember picking it out at Blockbuster on the thing, and oh wow, this is a longer one. Yeah, so
those tapes held 2 hours of video. Now, they would compress it. Let's see, what was it called back in the day? There was long play, slow play, extended play. They could adjust how much footage they could put on tape. Also, they could just add more tape. But typically, the duration was 2 hours.
Yeah.
So I guess it could have been 2 hours and 10 minutes, and they didn't need to overflow. And they had to squeeze the previews in there. But at any rate, it's a long movie.
One of my first jobs was making videos for a camp, and it was like what the kids experienced that week in camp, and we had tapes that were 20 minutes. They had just a very little tape in there, but that meant my final video couldn't be longer than 20 minutes because it would get cut off. So that was always a nice limit for me. I was like, oh, cool, I could do less work because I have probably enough to do 2 hours.
So, Haley, what is it exactly about Braveheart that appeals to you?
It's just the plot, the story. I honestly kind of like the violence. Just the passion, I guess, that Mel Gibson portrays through William Wallace. I just feel it like right here, when he's like inspiring them all to fight.
Yeah.
It's just, I don't know.
And when I was a kid, I watched that movie and I was like shocked by how violent it was. There's like a scene where, I don't remember if it was him or someone else, someone rides in on a horse inside of this keep or whatever, and someone's like in bed and they get up and he like hits him right in the face with a morning star. I was just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe what I just witnessed.
Yep.
But of course now it's kind of blasé, right?
Yeah, when I was a kid, I remember my parents watching it on TV. I was really little at the time, but the scene that was playing was when they're starting that first battle and they all like flash their bombs and get shot with arrows. And that's something that stands out to me when I was a kid. But yeah.
Have you seen it recently?
Yeah, past couple months. I definitely watched it during quarantine, actually.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, yeah, I did.
It's a comforting movie for you.
Oh, yes.
Chris, when was the last time you saw this movie?
Whew, man, it's been a long time. It might have been off of VHS. Man. Yeah, I don't even remember. I'm sure I watched it in college because I'm sure I studied it at some point, watching it, trying to have takeaways for cinematic reasons.
So I watched it recently. And why did I watch it? Oh, yeah. So my wife and I went to Scotland last summer. And we went to, where William Wallace, the fort was. And we saw the Wallace sword and all that. And we came back. We're like, we're going to watch Braveheart when we get home. And we watched it. And the last time I'd seen it, I must have been like 13 or something. And boy, I thought it was kind of cheesy the second time around. Like, I remember it being like so gritty and so violent. And I don't know, it just looks kind of 90s to me now.
Oh, you think it's cheesy? No.
Well, it's like compared to my childhood imagination of what was happening there.
Yeah, it's like doorways are not as tall as they once were. It's because
exactly.
This is before the big VFX boom too.
Yeah.
So like there are really large scenes that actually have 100 extras in them instead of the same dude printed 100 times or what have you, you do in a new modern film. So sometimes it's just the how the film was made that dates it. Like it might be the special effects in it. It might be obviously the attire always dates something to a period, but I think the production of something tends to lean to that of like what was acceptable. I was watching Titanic recently. And there was some scenes in it, and I'm like, that is not believable. Yet I remember watching it in the theater and being like, oh my God, just blown away by the boat going up on its edge and all this kind of stuff. And I watch it now, and I'm like, that's such bad green screen. Yeah. What's going on? You can obviously tell it's a short and small set and everything. I mean, of course, I know that from behind the scenes, but there's a lot of it, at the time, we just couldn't see that grandeur. That was never presented before. Now you get the Marvel universe. You get... there's just nothing off limits. There's not anything happening off camera.
So how long before all these Marvel movies start to look cheesy?
Oh, like yesterday.
Really? If you watch Iron Man, the first Iron Man, yes,
maybe not.
Now it's look cheesy.
I can say this: the first Spider-Man, but that was the early 2000s.
This is 2001.
I just thought
2001.
of Spider-Man too. Actually, that popped into my head.
Because we're making a course, and I had to go through some scenes and stuff, and I'm like, the makeup for the bad guy, whatever his name is, the Green Goblin, it's very The Mask looking.
I thought that movie looked cheesy when it came out.
Yeah, I guess that's probably true. You know what really stands up is the original Jurassic Park, even though it was like made in the early 90s. But it's because it's mostly practicals, and it's also using like the power of film, which is hint that something's happening but not actually show it, which is far more suspenseful than just showing anything and everything. It's more strength in the story than, I guess.
Also, I think that Steven Spielberg is probably just a little bit more conscientious about the limitations of CG at the time.
Totally.
Right? Like, he knows that it is not looking great, so don't just try to feature it front and center all the time because it's not going to age well.
Well, and he did go through Jaws, and you can't watch Jaws without being... I guess I've gone through Universal Studio, and Bruce came and jumped and scared us all, and you could tell it was just an animatronic shark. But, people were running out of the movie just totally scared when that first came out. So I think that's just one of those things that, like, when you bring that new... what was I watching the other day? Oh, it was The Hobbit. No, it wasn't The Hobbit. It was the Lord of the Rings.
That looks cheesy too.
Oh man, looks way bad. And I remember thinking how beautiful they looked.
Haley seemed offended when
I
you said
love
that.
Lord of the Rings.
Oh, the
too.
story is great, but like some of the CGI is really bad, and not only that, I was watching Hobbit, and it's Smaug. Is that the name of
the dragon?
The dragon, and it was. I'm like, that's not how a dragon would talk. It's such a stupid thing to think.
Like how it looks, or how it the words that it used.
Yeah, no, it was like how its mouth is moving and that kind of stuff, and but it's like, what do I know? What dragons aren't even real. Why would I not have my disbelief suspended? I don't know.
What's the other movie that had a talking dragon that you would compare it to? Pete's Dragon, 1977.
So much more believable because it was a cartoon.
Yeah,
that's way more.
Is that it? Is that the last dragon that spoke? Oh no. What was the movie with Anthony Hopkins? Dragonheart.
Dragonheart. Yeah, I think there's got to be
other cartoons, surely.
Yeah, other cartoons for sure, or medieval. I know are movies with dragons, but dragons talking, that's special.
Yeah,
that's different. It's
actually, and now that I think about it, Pete's Dragon did not talk.
In my childhood, it did.
You could understand Pete. Yeah, he like grunted and stuff.
I can't remember.
He talked about it as well as like Scooby Doo. Anyways, probably enough BSing about movies.
I did watch the new movie Scooby Doo Scoob the day it was released, along with Trolls. So I helped from quarantine to launch some blockbusters from home.
You're supporting Hollywood,
Yeah, exactly. That's how I felt. I was like, man, it wasn't to get my son to not cry or to be happy or anything. It was to help out Hollywood.
Okay, so the actual topic of the day, color correction.
Color correction.
Well, not color correction, just like color generally.
Yeah,
guess, right?
I'm going to support blue today. I'm on
Team Blue.
Team Blue.
What am I going to be?
Red, maybe.
Red versus blue.
Red versus blue.
Remember that?
Yeah, that was like one of the first
That's like
Let's
the first
Play
machinima.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I haven't watched much Red versus Blue.
No, I just remember watching.
I'm gonna say Team Green. If we're talking about color grading, we got to consider like one of the the greatest examples of color grading, which is the Matrix.
Yeah, totally.
Green all over it. Green and blue.
I remember because I remember watching it was probably a Criterion Collection DVD of The Matrix, and that I never really paid attention to that The Matrix, everything was tinted green, even down to shirts that's supposed to be white had a tint of green. And so all the costuming along with the coloring of the film, but it was a lot through the set design and through the costumes that the green is there. I'm sure it's tinted otherwise because I know that skin tone is also affected in those scenes and whatnot. But it wasn't as apparent, but it's a very clever way of showing and having you realize you're in a different reality, I guess, right?
So a little bit of trivia here. I don't know how many people do this, but I have read it as a technique and I've tried it. It works. When you're looking at something that's color tinted for a long enough amount of time, your brain starts to filter it out. It's probably what happened when you were watching The Matrix, where you are watching these scenes that are tinted green, and the scene might be 20 minutes long or something, and you don't think about it as green. It just looks like normal.
Yeah.
Well, your brain is just sort of adapting to that. The same thing. You ever wear warm tinted sunglasses that are like orange, and then you take it off and suddenly everything looks like it's washed in blue.
Yeah.
Because your brain is like recalibrating. Well, professional color graders will have a white card next to their desk, either hanging on the wall or on a little placard, like a easel on their desk, and they'll have daylight light shining on it so that they can recalibrate their eye and their brain. They can look away from the screen, recalibrate, and then go back to the screen.
Well, it makes sense. We have to tell cameras what color white is, and our eyes do it. I mean, you get done with a movie, at the theater, and you go out the doors. Everything's, of course, super bright, but everything's blue for a second until your eyes get used to it, or what have you. So it makes sense. Our eyes are just so much more efficient than cameras, obviously.
Yeah,
I'm looking for that camera that's going to be as efficient as my eyeballs, which will have the dynamic range. What about 16 stops of dynamic range is what our eyes are? No, 22. I don't know what it is.
But what happens is if you're color grading, and this has happened to me. Say you have a scene, let's just go with green, and you want to tint it green throughout. Well, you're going shot by shot, and ideally you're using a reference shot, so you color grade a shot, and then you look back at it to compare. But if you don't recalibrate your own eyesight and your own brain, you'll start to like give it extra green and extra green and extra green because you look at it and go, it's not quite green enough. And that's because you're just getting used to the green. And then if you put it away and come back to it, the next day, it just looks like garbage.
Yeah.
So you gotta constantly recalibrate and get back to normal.
I've done that with contrast. Like, oh man, this does not seem, the blacks aren't crunched as much. I really want to make this really solid shot, and you add in contrast, and then you print it, and you have a file. You go watch it on something else, and you're like, oh my gosh, the shadows everywhere are complete black. This does not look good at all. It's not until you took it somewhere else to look at it or just got away from it. That's probably more of what did it. I probably could have watched the same thing on the same screen just, hours later and thought the same feeling. But the reference clip was one of the biggest things for me, that if you're working on a big project, you can get so far away from what your target is through small increments. So, the idea of I start on shot 1 and I have to get through 100 shots. I want them to all to be normalized. So with the same, color values, and, red looks red, and skin tones look the same. But if you don't have that reference to go to, it kind of reminds me of that game I used to play when you were kids, Telephone. Is like you tell it to somebody, the next person, and so the further away you get from that reference, the more you're going to skew from it, and likely your color palette or your choices are going to change. The one thing I find really hard with that is choosing that shot that I'm going to use as a reference and making it look the way I want to before I get started on everything else. So it's like you spend the time doing it, but I want to step away from this and get back to it. Or you didn't get to see it in more context, so you're like, I see a couple shots graded this way. I don't know if I like it that much anymore, and so having to go back. But it's really easy to get away from the right tonal palette if you don't have that reference shot. And it makes sense to the white card. I would probably never pull that out if I was in like someone's studio. Like, why do they have a piece of white on Spotlight? But it makes good sense.
Yeah. I mean, those are really for people who are doing a lot of color grading. But maybe the most common way people interact with color is to correct a broken shot. No, I don't want to say broken, but like correcting
Imperfect.
footage that is imperfect, right?
Yeah.
We could talk about LUTs and all that, and raw, but really it's like you get a shot in and either it looks bad, or you've taken shots from a bunch of different angles or using multiple cameras and they just don't look right. Like they don't, when you edit them back to back, there's like this big change, suddenly everything's really dark, or things look good in one shot and then suddenly they're really contrasty in the next shot.
Yeah, it's not color contrast, but the amount of contrast between the two shots is more apparent when they're butted up against each other. So then you're going,
or both.
Yeah,
right?
and so a lot of times you're trying to normalize all your shots so that they all look similar. So it looks like they shot on the same camera on the same day or that kind of thing. And so that can skew your color, and sometimes that'll trap you, right? Like there's only one place you can be, and it's like, okay, well, I just have to like settle for it. And that's where raw and shooting in different log profiles and whatnot, and different picture profiles on your camera to get different colors. But that, a lot of time spent trying to uniform your cameras before you go out to shoot. If you're doing a multi-camera shoot, is helpful. I know for me, I've almost swore off trying to shoot in log or in like raw for Videomaker, because I'm just trying to get a good, nice looking shot. I am not going to need to dramatically colorize something, or I'm typically in a controlled situation. So if I'm shooting in a set, it's likely that I'm going to have control over knowing what the color temperature of your lights are, what the camera's set to, and all the rest, and trying to unify that. But look at our shots here. Both Mike and Haley look like the same color skin tone, and they're both on Canon cameras. I'm on a Panasonic. I do have a red face typically, so that's playing a little bit into it. But
also, I think that we have this camera set up to add some extra saturation. Your camera.
Oh, Mike, yeah. So we haven't not too much unification there, but it's hard. The first time you cut in some GoPro footage in with like a larger camera of any kind, you're putting some highly compressed footage in with other footage, and it's not going to mesh. And there's a lot of reasons other than color that things don't look the same, your depth of field and all the rest. But it's a thing when you're dealing with any color in general that is trying to unify them, and that can be even more difficult if you're shooting in RAW or in a log.
So, Chris, we've mentioned this term a number of times. Probably a good spot to do a definition.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was about to chime in. Can you please explain?
And Haley, get ready with the sound effect. We're going to quiz Chris on what the definition of a log is.
Okay.
He's probably going to get it right. You can get the right one ready.
Yeah, it's going to be a good
Okay,
one.
what's it going to be, Chris?
It's a
log?
It's a logarithmic curve that is applied to the image.
That's right.
Before compression.
All right, it worked.
All right. And the cool thing about log is typically allows for more dynamic range to be captured, right? So you're not having to choose as much if you're shooting a scene and you have really bright brights and really dark darks. You're not going to have to settle as much for either having overexposed or underexposed things. The issue is not all log is the same. So log on a Canon camera, even log amongst the same brand camera, can be different. So the log, C-Log from this EOS R that we have here versus the C200, they're different logs. And so if you tried to put the same grade on the same shot, they wouldn't look right. So it's definitely a great tool to have, and it allows you to, like I said, have more dynamic range and pull out more colors, but it becomes quite a bit more difficult to grade. And that's where the idea of a LUT, which is a lookup table, which is really just a, hey, I adjusted all of the levels for you, put it in this preset, and you're applying it to this thing, and it's going to set all those levels to that.
Yeah, and it really is, in both cases, referring to color values, I guess. So, it's like I don't want to say the opposite of logarithmic curves or linear curves. Is that the opposite, you think? That's another thing. In addition to logarithmic curves, there's linear curves, which is normal.
Yeah, it's linear straight, logarithmic's curved.
Yeah, and usually how it works is a log curve does something like boost up the shadows, so their values are higher than they would normally be, and bring down the highlights so that they're lower than they would normally be. And the result is an image that is not very contrasty. It looks very flat.
It looks very flat, but you bring back all of the color and when you're trying to grade it.
Yep.
But it can be difficult. And
a LUT takes those values and puts them kind of into it adjusts the values such that it yields a certain look, whatever look that LUT is trying to do.
And for a long time, I felt like, okay, if I could just find a Rec 709 LUT.
What's that?
Rec 709, so that's just a standard color value for television a lot of times, right?
Yeah, I don't know what it actually stands for, but yeah, it's like if you want it to look like normal.
Yeah, it's like you have your camera on standard, you're shooting without any kind of things. 709, just Rec 709 LUT is going to get you back to that place. However, it's not. This isn't like this is going to do this. And not only that, but you could have a log that takes C-Log, or a LUT, I'm sorry, that takes C-Log and takes it to Rec 709, and you could have 4 different ones. And they all say they go from C-Log to Rec 709. So, and they all, when you apply them, are all different. And the reason why is you can't say, I can't apply a preset of something on without knowing what the whole scene has, right? So if you're putting on just think of this as a preset on something, it doesn't know that you're going to be on the very high end of its dynamic range and on the very low end of its dynamic range. It might think you might, and then you'd think if you applied a color to that the grade would be different than if I had no really, really brights and really, really darks. It's going to all of a sudden add way more contrast, or it's going to try to pull down the highlights when you didn't need to anyway.
So Rec 709 stands for Recommendation BT 709. And it's a standardized format for high definition TV.
Okay, so BT 709, you'll see those as well. Rec 709, BT 709 are somewhat interchangeable, but you can find LUTs from everywhere. I mean, there are people making LUTs, and it's not the same as a look because it actually is.
Some people treat it that way though, right? Like if people who make custom LUTs kind of are going for looks.
Well, that's the thing is like a LUT can be a look, and it's also changing your color value, but you can also add a look after you've added a LUT. So you get it to Rec 709. It's trying to get to a standard and then adding a color to it. But yeah, a lot of times it's if you're looking for that greenish look, I don't know how many times, what did they call it? There was a green look that was in
The Matrix.
No, it's in the Matrix, but it was in the look, the Red Giant looks. I think it was called
Colorista, Magic Bullet.
Yeah. I think it was called Neo.
Oh yeah, well there you go.
So I was just like, it was totally like, hey, here's your
a non-trademarkable
word. Yeah. But yeah, the look, and that's so. The looks is so 2000s. You just don't see things as drastically change color like that as much. We're not speaking right now in visual language as much with looks. It tends to add era to your footage. It kind of reminds me of like drop shadows and other things that are just
you're talking about the really extreme color tinting.
Yeah, totally. Like the
Traffic. You ever see Traffic?
Traffic. I think of music videos. Music videos are like the extreme of everything. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm going to give you a wide angle shot. I'm going to move the camera a bunch. It's going to have rapid cuts, and it's probably going to have some kind of bizarre color to it, or hyper color to it. You know, it's going to either be super bright or what have you, or really dramatic. Because a lot of music videos tend to be just like art pieces that go along with the video. They're not necessarily like same story or anything like that. I always love that on music videos, where like the music video has a totally different story than the actual song does.
So we've kind of jumped to LUTs and log and shooting with raw, but maybe let's just like go back to the beginning here, just like square one, to this idea that we were talking about regarding, matching shots.
Yeah.
Now, Chris, when you're in this situation where you need to match these shots, what is your normal process? Where do you start?
Probably, on whatever the most important thing is in that shot, right? Is like, if I'm shooting a person, my goal is to keep an eye on the skin tones. And more so, my first step is what do I want to match to what? So if you're dealing with camera A and camera B, or shot A and shot B, which one of those two is the goal, is where I'm trying to get the other one to look like. Now, a lot of times it ends up being they both have to move towards each other. So you can't say I have shot B and shot A and I want to match shot B to shot A. Well, I might have to get I might have to desaturate shot A, because getting shot B saturated as much as the shot A looks horrible.
Yeah, sometimes that happens, right?
Yeah,
when there's just not enough color information.
Yeah, or just the subject matter or whatever it is just doesn't look right with that. It's easy to go skin tone to skin tone for the same people, right? So, that's when your color cards and that kind of samples before shots are really helpful, because you can actually compare color to color. You can go, oh, these are 4 or 5 colors that I show every time I do a shot, and I can make sure those colors look right. But any shot has got so many more gradations of color than any color card is going to be able to offer. And so, trying to find the place where you want to head, that's step one. But before that usually means I tried to just grade them both to their best look. So like a lot of times I'll start with shots that don't look like each other, but what I do before I do everything is like, I want to be able to look at it and not be like, I hate that. Most of the time it's a lot of self-loathing in my edit. So it's like, okay, I like to do the audio because I can't stand listening to the audio not be as strong as it possibly can. But most people don't go to that first, but that's a pet peeve of mine. So I usually go with that just so I can listen to good audio through the time. And then I also work on making them all like, okay, anything that was a little hot, I'm going to bring it down. Anything that's showing any glaring error, so I don't have to keep on looking at it over and over again as I edit, I will do those things, little like preliminary color assessments. Or if I shot all in the same situation, I'll grade one shot, apply that same grade on everything, and it's not until I'm done with everything or with the cut that you get into the color edit, and that's just because you'd be wasting your time editing stuff that might end up on the editor's floor, not
Yeah,
being used.
going shot by shot and adjusting the color is certainly time consuming.
Totally.
You don't want to do it if you don't have to, right?
Yeah, and the thing is your full piece is going to speak to you on what it needs, right? So what if your piece needs to be very contrasty? It might not say that, or you might not even have the vision to do that until you have everything together, or you might go, oh, you know what, or you stumble upon some kind of look that something else. I've had a lot of times where you get inspired by something else. I'm like, oh, what if I can make everything look like this? But when it comes to the actual grading part, it's all about just looking at your meters and trying to get the your waveform and your histogram to look the same in the same values, and then use your eye. The hard thing is if you don't have a calibrated screen. Now I have a screen over here that self-calibrates itself, so I know I can really trust it, and which is rad. But it's super expensive, so it's not. You get better. You'll. It's a whole lot easier to learn how to read your tools than it is to spend the money on a monitor that's just going to be correct, because you're, like we talked about earlier, your eyes are going to lie to you. So even if you have this beautiful monitor that's totally color critical all the time, always calibrated right, you're still going to get stuck in a rut of seeing things a different way because you're too far in it.
Yeah, so you just mentioned waveforms and vector scopes, and this is like a tool that's inside of professional video editing software that a lot of people, at least who are starting out or maybe who are intermediate, don't know to look for. Or if they saw it, they wouldn't know what it was. But they really are essential tools when you're working with color. We have a good article called Waveforms and Vector Scopes Explained, if you're interested in learning more about how these work.
One of the reasons why I learned how to use those was seeing someone else in our community that made video, and I was jealous of how nice it looked. And they didn't have any nicer quality equipment than I had. Man, why is he just that much better of a conceptual? No, it's just he knew how to grade and knew how to spend the time to do that, and that was hardly a step that I was even doing. I was trying to make sure my grade was right, just shooting in correct exposure, let alone all the nuances you can get into when it comes to color correction.
So we talked about color correction, and really this is all about. Well, I'll just tell you how my approach might differ from yours, Chris. It's really, color correction is about getting a good, getting good, well exposed and saturated shots, and making sure they all have kind of a consistency between them.
Yeah.
Without getting into the artistic and aesthetic side of like designing color for emotional impact. But my approach is usually to choose a shot, and I usually will pick a shot that is already well exposed, nothing that's overexposed or underexposed, and I just get that shot to look good. No tinting, no grading, no special looks, but just like get the exposure just right. I watch the scopes and I make sure that the values are good. I get the right amount of saturation, and I make sure that the white balance is nice, and then I just like use that as my reference shot, and I'll go to every other shot and look back, make some tweaks, make sure that if I toggle between these two shots that everything is going to work out. And, for the most part, like for the stuff that we do here where, at least half of every video is like, a talking head shot in our studio.
Yeah.
It's easy. Just like correct that shot, get it looking good, and then copy the values, copy the whatever the settings were, just like across everything. And then do the same thing, like go to whatever the next chunk of footage is. Like if it's something shot out in the office or outdoors, pick a clip, make sure that it's in alignment with the indoor shot in terms of its like tinting and brightness and darkness and all that. Edit it and then copy and paste all the values across the outdoor shots and watch through, make sure that they are consistent among each other, because sometimes that'll happen where you shoot outdoors and the sun will shift a little bit.
Totally.
And things get kind of screwed up and you gotta adjust for that. But I do a lot of copying and pasting though. I really like the paste attributes feature.
Yeah, something I use often now is the remove attributes feature, in that you can actually in Premiere Pro,
Premiere, yeah.
in that you can remove a single. So I'll have maybe I'll have fill left and right, because I do that a lot on audio. That'll be on something, but some of it's different or whatever. But I'll have I've been using film convert nitrate to get kind of a filmic look on some things, and so but I want to make some changes to something else. I can remove some other individual plugin, even though I have 6 or whatever applied on it, remove that and apply another one. But I always do that. The idea of getting something, you get them all somewhat neutralized, but the idea more so is that I want to get all of these as close as quickly as I can, so that I can stop thinking about them not being right, so I can get the actual edit done. That's usually it's like I don't want to dislike what I'm working on. I want it to get better and better every time I look at it, and I definitely don't want to look at something that I'm not happy with the whole time. And like at the TV station, I remember they'd work with scratch audio, not do any of the color, and like just be working on the cut with music, and I'm like, man, I just don't like myself enough.
This is for commercials?
This is for commercials. So it was only 30 seconds or something like that. But
that must have been different from commercials to the station promos, right? Like the station promos always had a very stylistic and polished look.
Totally, but Greg and Casey both edited. They just do the cut before they do anything else, and I'm like, man, I cannot handle listening to that voiceover not all compressed. I can't stand seeing all of the color shifts in how poorly you'll be like, I love this shot, but then this car came over here and made this weird reflection, and now I have to deal with that. It's like I like to get it all so I can continue to love it more every time I work on it instead of the other way around. So I get energy from it than be built down. But that's just my own self-confidence, or whatever. But it's always been the way I do it, because I like to get passion from my work. So like if I'm starting to feel more artistically creative from seeing the work, like, oh, I see the potential of this now, and now it makes me excited. Oh, I can really try to do this and that, and it fills me with energy to do it. Versus like if I would get less and less energy if I didn't like it from the beginning. I'm like, oh, this is just going to be a pile of crap. I'm just going to not care.
So have you had much luck color matching between cameras?
Film Convert apparently has they do. I have it. I have not used it yet. They shouldn't hear this, but they have a new plugin that I got to try in beta that is supposed to be a good unification. And the big difference is the hard thing there is that you're matching different color sciences. It's
really, really difficult.
It's very different. The thing that makes one camera look really special might be the way it deals with color. I mean, one of the reasons why I think Canon is still a very strong brand is people love the Canon color science. They love the way it looks compared to out of the box something else. Yet I know some people say the same thing about Sony. You get kind of caught up to it, and to say which one's better, that's somewhat subjective. But I can tell you they're very different, right? So like, this is a good example. The Sony FS5 II came out after the Sony Venice. Sony Venice is the full frame, full cinema camera, quite expensive, but they built that from the ground up. It wasn't based on anything or whatever, right? So it has what they call the Venice color science. But if you had any other Sony camera and you used it with it, it would have the old color science, so you couldn't get them just to look like each other. You couldn't have a B camera that it just looked like the other camera. And so I think the first one that they did this, they have a lot of cameras now that have the Venice color science, and it's like a point that they put on there to sell, which I think is only to those that needed to work with other cameras with Venice color science.
Yeah, their phone has Venice color science.
Yeah, exactly. They're trying to get you into the ecosystem, but that the FS5 one wouldn't be a good B camera for the Venice. Now it's kind of weird having like a $40,000 camera and like a $5,000 your B camera, but regardless, people do it all the time. And so the big thing was this now has the Venice color science, and it is going to make there's so much nuance in skin tone. We have so many. I mean, you just look at us in general. Look at my face. The different reds are in my face are a lot to deal with.
Team Red.
What's that?
Team Red.
Team Red. Yeah, we're gonna get some makeup for my bright red face.
Oh no, you're team blue.
I'm team blue.
red.
Yeah, we should do this. We should have just colored white balanced our cameras different, so you could be red, you could be green. I think green, red, and blue are about the three we could probably force wrong.
Yeah, we could force it wrong, and it would be it'd be difficult to watch, right?
Yeah, it would be. Actually, there's some of the first use of color in film was colorizing black and white to put contrast between scenes. They weren't using it the way we do now, but it was like a whole scene would be all tinted red. So like, sepia, but it was red sepia and green sepia and yellow sepia, which is a little strange nowadays. People don't really use it that way.
Well, this is really getting outside of the scope of our conversation, but Great Train Robbery had color in it.
Yeah.
They like painted individual, like the smoke, they would paint it like red or something, or pink.
Yeah, well, I mean, think about it. One, I know moving pictures and stuff was exciting because, like, you saw a still. That was exciting. It was like, oh, that didn't have to be a painting. Then all of a sudden, motion pictures, like, oh, things are actually moving and I can watch something that happened in the past. That blows your mind away. And then you start getting it being able to do surreal things. I could just imagine, when people would go to the theater to be wowed. Like, we go there to be entertained now, but we don't go there to like have our mind expanded. I mean, I guess some movies do that way, but that's not typically at least what Blockbuster's trying to make it happen. The big money makers are just trying to entertain you for a while, but I imagine when you're pushing any kind of artistic expression, usually very few get it or can accept it. It'd be just really cool to have a medium that the masses see and go, whoa, and really blown away. And for them, it was like just the format. It's like all of the language of film. Like, oh man, this person was 23 when they came up with the idea of a montage or something like that. I'm like, what was I doing when I was 23? Keg stand. But then again, the tools weren't brand new, so there isn't that easy language to find. I mean, no, it wasn't easy, but you know what I'm saying? Like when something's new, it's easy to stumble upon something that's impactful versus something that's been used over and over again. You're not likely just to stumble over something that's been there the whole time.
So speaking of doing stupid stuff when you're young versus other people, the one that always makes me feel bad, not video related, not filmmaking related, Isaac Newton.
Yeah.
How old Isaac Newton was when he invented calculus.
How old
okay,
was
there's a trivia question. Get ready with the buttons here.
He was 27.
Wrong. Yes.
How old was he?
23 years old.
Oh my God. I'm a loser.
Yeah.
Yay, Newton.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it puts us to shame.
Yeah, well, that's genius in general. You think like
exactly.
that. And you think of, or like, if you're feeling poor, just think about how old Mark Zuckerberg is and how much money he has.
Oh yeah, for sure.
That kind of thing. It's always, Haley doesn't know this because she's young, but when I was watching, she might know. Well, actually, she's old enough that if she was in like a sport, you'd be aged out already. You'd be retired.
Oh yeah.
Right. Like if you were a gymnast, you would have been retired at like 17. It
depends, I guess, on the sport.
On the sport, yeah.
You baseball or football players, look at Tom Brady or...
Yeah, well, Brady's the outlier, right? So, like, a 40-year-old quarterback is mostly unheard of.
But you would find a 40-year-old golfer in every PGA tournament.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. But, basketball, baseball maybe has a little bit older. I think it's...
What about fishing?
Fishing, yeah. I don't think there's the more patience you have.
Yeah.
Or I think the more... places more tricks I don't know. I'm not a fisherman.
So we talked about color grading a little bit. We talked about a lot about color correction. We talked about the difference here, right? So we kind of implied the difference here. Color correction is just sort of getting everything to look right and consistent. Color grading is really in order to use color to tell your story, right? Yeah. To impact emotion. And we don't do a ton of this around here, although Chris, you did a little bit of color grading on the A roll of our new course.
Yeah, I lifted the blacks a little bit just to in general, just trying to make it a little more dramatic because we were doing a little bit lower production value on it. So I'm like, well, I want this shot to be interesting or whatever. I think it also is to cure the boredom. You know, like if you shoot the same thing over and over again, you hope to get something different or better. And so I like to experiment.
We also
there,
have a vignette on the new setup.
Yeah, which is funny because vignettes were my absolute favorite thing, 10 years ago. And I have it applied a little bit differently, but it was mostly because I wasn't able to get the vignette with just our lighting because I wanted to have darker, more moody lighting. I don't really, not for any kind of effect other than I just wanted to look differently. But, everybody gets so excited about wanting to color grade, and that's great. I mean, if you have beautiful shots with lots of great color and you have lots of color information to work with, super exciting. Mm-hmm. I think of when I first started shooting and having to correct white balance on a highly compressed shot sucks.
Yeah, it's no fun.
No,
it never looks right either.
No, and I remember someone the first time I got, we can white balance in post. Oh, really? And you get in there and there's an eyedropper to click on white. Oh, is there anything white in this scene? Well, that looks kind of white, and then you realize, oh no, that was blue. But they look white in the camera, and now everything looks all sorts of weird. And, or you correct something and just skin tone will never look right, even though it's just because you just don't have enough color, enough information there to not generally change everything. And that's why you'd want to shoot raw or at a lower compression rate because you have more color data. And that's super great, but not always necessary. So like for us, when I'm shooting here in the shooting A-roll, really what I want is something that comes right out of the camera I don't have to do anything to. I would love the audio to sound fantastic and the video to be exactly the way I want to present it. Saves me time in production and when editing. It works out great. There's really no reason that I'm going to do any kind of crazy color grade unless we're trying to prove something or demonstrate something. But so you can get caught up in this. I can shoot in RAW, I can shoot in log, but is it necessary? And I can tell you this, that unless you have a lot more time, both those things are going to add lots of hours to your post-production. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't do them because there are times when they're going to be so essential. I mean, talk about, fixing white balance. Fixing white balance in RAW is actually changing the white balance. I mean, that's like as if you change the white balance on set. So that's fantastic. I mean, that right there is worth it. But isn't it just easier to set the white balance correctly? Should be. Don't get me wrong. I've done a lot of mistakes. I've set white balance wrong, and I've been yelled at for doing so. Mike's really horrible to me. No, it's not. This was a client. But
they yelled at you for white balance?
Yeah, I guess
you got it wrong, right?
Yeah. Interesting situation. Shooting a car dealership for commercials, a bunch of commercials. So we were shooting them. They're going to an editor. We were sending it to them on beta. We shot it in SD, so you can understand how long ago this was. And my shooter, he wasn't feeling very good. So I'm like, oh, you'll do audio. You just monitor audio today, and I'll shoot. Well, he was a better shooter and I was a better audio guy. So the audio didn't turn out that great. And then I didn't white balance correctly. And then it got to the editor and he freaked out because there just wasn't a lot of tools at the time to fix that. Or they were really expensive and he didn't have them. So it was kind of like all of our videos are going to look like trash and our customers going to be mad and all this kind of thing. But they still hired us again. So, what was it worth? But
did the video make it to air in that state?
Yep. Audio was distorted and the colors were blue and they still ran them.
Yeah,
and
some people just rather do that than shoot again.
Well, and I'm sure they still sold cars. I mean, the idea of spending $500 to sell a car that you make $3,000 on is a really easy choice, and it's not always very important that the production looks good. The story really holds out. I mean, we're talking about Braveheart. Haley's not bothered by the horrible filmmaking in it. I'm just kidding. But the story is what's compelling, right? And that's the thing that brings her back. And I think that's the thing.
I think Haley said that she likes the violence.
She likes
That's it.
The scene where the guy gets smashed in the face with the Morning Star.
Oh man,
it's brutal.
It is. I just watched The Hateful Eight again, and the scene where he blows Mexican Bob's face off.
Oh yeah, on accident.
No, it was on purpose.
No, I was thinking of Pulp Fiction.
Yeah, but it's like it's so graphic, and I think it's funny because they actually end up making fun of it because the guy had a big bounty on his head, but if you can't identify him, then you can't get the money. But the story is really what is key on all of this stuff. And so if your color grade isn't going to help your story, why are you spending the time doing it? Now, I'm not saying have crap. We don't want to have overexposed shots. We don't want to have underexposed shots. You want to do that, but unless the color is really going to, you don't want the color taking your audience out of the scene. You don't want them to have that, I'm watching a movie feeling. And so none of your production, that includes the audio and all the things, should be polished enough that people aren't taken away from the story by going, I'm watching a movie. They should just be enjoying the story as it comes out. But I watch a lot of movies with my son that I watched when I was a kid because of nostalgia, and I'm realizing that they were horrible, and I was just young and I liked the story in it, like Goonies. Well, Goonies is actually a pretty good movie.
Yeah, actually, that holds up well.
That holds up well. Dukes of Hazzard is a good one. As far as a TV show, it's mostly garbage. A-Team, I remember watching that. Same thing. Bad acting.
Yeah,
really bad
TV
plots.
shows are a different story. Yeah.
Totally, but that there, it's like, there's nothing here. But then, like, some TV show. Well, SpongeBob's a good example. I've always loved SpongeBob. SpongeBob came out after I was graduated from high school, so I probably shouldn't have been watching it, except for my influences in college got me watching a lot of cartoons and sitting on my butt. But that I watch it with my son now. I'm like, this is still funny.
Yeah.
And so because the story's there, it's interesting.
So you mentioned Hateful Eight. Actually, quick side note, Chris was just talking about how we need to get this podcast set up so we can bring up examples, and this really would have been the episode to do that too.
Oh yeah, color examples. Oh yeah.
I was thinking about that.
The hard thing is, because I've been pulling examples for the course.
Actually, we can do this. We can do this. I can see my screen on Haley's screen now.
Totally, your screen is so you can.
So Haley, drag my screen there.
Do you have what is on the screen already?
No, not yet. Drag it to the top half. So not that one, not that one.
Oh.
At the very top
The
left.
computer screen.
This one?
Yeah, drag that to the top right. Yeah, that empty. Who is it going to go? It's stuck. Try one more time. Yeah, there you go. Okay.
Oops,
now,
where am I supposed to drag it?
It didn't take again.
If you just double click on it, it should.
Yeah, it's not going.
Tap on it twice.
Oh, okay. So actually, yeah, that put it in the main one. Oh, we lost our three-way split.
That's okay.
So Hateful Eight. Let's talk about the color.
Yeah.
So can you see it, Chris?
I can see the screen there. Yeah.
Yep. So let's see. I'm gonna make a new tab. So here we go.
That's still there.
Yeah. Okay. So this is the first time we've gotten to do this. So color grading here, and if you're listening to this, we'll just describe what we're looking at here. But we're looking at a shot. This is like from the first half of the film where it's in the snow.
Yeah, this is when Samuel L. Jackson's characters pretty much. This is where they meet.
Yeah, that's right. Am
I going to get tested here?
Yeah. Have you seen this movie?
Yeah, it's been a while, but
I just watched this weekend, so it's fresh in my head.
I don't know. So should we do a trivia thing here?
We could. Just a fun side note on this. Netflix has an extended, full episodic. So every single chapter in the movie actually has an hour or longer film, so you can watch the extended cut from Tarantino that is like 8 or 9 full episodes. So the 2-hour movie is now 9 hours or something like that. I almost watched it, then I realized I didn't have enough time to finish.
9 hours?
Or it's like every chapter. So I think there's 6 chapters, so maybe it's 6 or 7. But either way, that you could recut a film that you shot that was going to be 2 into 6 hours. Like there's that much more story that you like. I could get it if you just keep the slop in every shot, and the quick cuts aren't as quick and that kind of thing. But it means that there was so many scenes that they shot that were not necessary to the main story. Yeah. And that makes sense for Quentin Tarantino because he's so prolific with his storytelling and his characters that it would make sense that he'd have a lot of scenes to throw away.
So Haley, there's a button between these 2 frames called Preview to Program.
Yes.
If you press that button, it will swap back to where we were. There we go.
Here we are.
So we can toggle back and forth as we refer to this.
Yes.
Okay.
So let's go back to the shot. That was a good test of the system. So we're looking at a frame here, and the color grading is actually pretty neutral. Like the skin tones look natural.
Yeah.
So the shot we're looking at, if you're listening, is boy, what's the actor's name? There's Samuel L. Jackson and
Kurt Russell.
Kurt Russell.
Yeah.
Yep. So they're in the snow. Kurt Russell's pointing his gun at Samuel L. Jackson. There's like this thing throughout the snow shots where it almost is black and white, right? There's not a ton of color here. The only color is like these brown, earthy.
And that's for the most of all the film. Even when they get into the cabin, it's still very browny. I mean, it's very browny.
Yeah.
And Tarantino is a period piece and genre filmmaker. So like he made this because he wanted to make a Western. And so this is the thing I think is really interesting about Tarantino in general is, he didn't go to film school. He just studies films and then makes a film. So like, and he even keeps his own film. So like he has his Pulp Fiction script next to him when he writes. And so when he gets to his script and he goes, oh, it's on page 100. Where's the story at in this here? Okay, I'm going to go over and look at page 100 on my Pulp Fiction script. Oh, okay, we're about that far along in the story here too. And so to pace what a good pacing for a movie is, he even uses his own work, which I think is a little egotistical, but this is Tarantino. I think the guy thinks he's God. But, and he's a very, very talented guy. But I just think it's really interesting that he continues to use references like that, and then that he studies those genres. So like, what's the one that he recently did with, finally, the guy won an award for it, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. That's a total genre. It's a very man, I don't know what I'm looking for here.
Your brain just break.
Yeah, it totally did.
It's a period piece.
It's a period piece. I don't know where I'm going with that. Sorry, guys. Everybody's listening.
What the
colors and stuff.
The color in that is very much like 60s and 70s palette. It's got like these really earthy tones, oranges, yellows, browns.
Yeah, and the stuff looks, even when they go back and show like clips from other things, it's the color from that era. Like from the wardrobe to repainting buildings and that kind of stuff. But to feel like everything that was made in the 70s, it looks like that. Same with like Westerns. It's like they're trying to keep that genre in the, whenever this is happening. I think it's around the time of Lincoln, so I have no idea when that is.
Well, it was after Lincoln, right? Because they were talking about the letter that he had written.
It was a Lincoln letter.
It was post Civil War.
Yeah, but it wasn't. It was before Lincoln was dead.
Oh, so, really?
I think because they never talk about that part. They just talk about him being pen pals with him, and then being freed.
So here's the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood color palette, and there we go. And can I zoom in on this? Not really.
You can right click on that and say open.
It's Pinterest, and Pinterest just makes everything worse.
Oh.
Yeah. So, but at any rate, yeah, very much like this the 70s kind of look, and I guess 60s too. This was the late 60s. Was it late 60s? Yeah. Early 70s?
69.
But yeah, oranges, browns, yellows, a little bit of blue here. But obviously a very deliberate color palette,
totally.
Right? From Tarantino. So that's really a grading in a nutshell, right? It's just sort of setting the scene, applying a certain emotional, tone, really.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Thinking about color grading, like color temperature. So if a movie, you notice that it's like, if it's something that's a little more sad, it's like the colors like reads cold. Is that kind of part of grading?
For sure.
Totally.
I think in the most part when they shoot these films, the color temperature. So there's two things. There's like the grade or the tint that's applied in post-production, and there's the color temperature which it's shot in. And they probably will shoot a film with white balanced properly, so that if you looked at the raw footage, it would just look like normal footage. And then they apply this sort of cold temperature, which is probably a little bit different from color temperature as a camera reads it.
Yeah. And it's meant for the idea, red feels hot, warm, angry. Blue feels more cold, and that's also very specific to American culture, Western culture, because red means different different things in, say, China. Red is totally has a completely different meaning than we do in Western culture.
You know what is like a real clear version of this is Castle Black in Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Oh,
The whole thing is blue.
It's always
blue and
blue.
white, and it's really desaturated, and it sort of has this tone they're setting of this is desolate. It's out kind of in the middle of nowhere. It's like heartless. It's this heartless place where there's it's not exactly lawless, but the people there kind of make their own rules. And
a lot of times color is subtle. The color is not meant to be the main character. It's meant to make the character have more depth or the scene more depth or what have you. Blue is used a lot for day for night. Because if you're shot during the day and you're trying to make it look like nighttime, your shadows will betray you, but, full moon cast shadows.
Yeah, they did that famously in Castaway.
Yes.
The scene where Tom Hanks builds fire, shot during the day.
I was recently watching something that was on Nickelodeon, and it was these two kids who were talking, and they were talking about the stars they were seeing, yet they were showing these beautiful starscapes, and I'm like, there's too much light in there where they're at to be able to see that many stars. But they were, but you can't shoot in darkness. You wouldn't see anybody. There's no camera that looks that great in complete darkness. And so you could tell that they were lit. It reminds me of every movie that, like, as someone's walking through their house, it's like you can still see things. And it's like, well, a camera wouldn't be able to see those things if everything was in actual darkness. So it's like you're using lights to highlight the things you're supposed to be looking at. And there's or when someone hits a light switch and all of a sudden it's like goes from everything being nicely lit to being black. It's like, whose light switch works that good?
Yeah.
And controls all of the lights or all, there's obviously lights that are highlighting certain little things in the scene.
Yeah. Of course, in movies, they'll hit the switch and some lights turn off, but other lights turn on.
Exactly.
You don't actually, they don't point it out to you, but just so that you can actually see some stuff.
Yes. Well, and that transition, if you're going from really high key to low key, you're going to, it's going to cause you to think something changed, and then you're not going to really notice that it's being lit. It's just looks different, right?
You guys ever notice? You ever watch the show Scrubs?
Yeah.
They do this all the time in that show where, it's a pretty whimsical show, but occasionally they have these kind of serious scenes where it's like, a patient's dying or something, right? And they will go from this high key, very flat kind of lighting, kind of like the lighting we're in right now.
Totally.
To, the scene where so-and-so has to go tell someone that the bad news that they're not going to make it or whatever. And the lighting, when they change scenes, it'll suddenly be kind of dark, and you'll see the light coming through the Venetian blinds, and it's got a kind of a film noir look. And so they use the lighting there, and they tint the color kind of this, bluish tone. And now it's this, dramatic, somber moment.
Scrubs is a really great place to study film. They have a episode in just about every genre. They have one where, even though everything's pretty evenly lit, they have one where it's lit in like a sitcom stage. Mm-hmm. So you have Scrubs, whereas like a lot more feels like a documentarian is following them around or what have you. That instead it's like the Bundys or something like that or whatever. That's the sitcom from the 3/4 angle. But they do that all over the place, like from old horror and everything. It's a really I always pick that out. That's one of the reasons why I really like that show, other than just liking it in general. But apparently the cast is doing a podcast together.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because obviously everybody's in film is mostly out of work, so it might as well get them together and talk. So it's kind of a neat thing that they're all like friends and they all still would want to talk to each other.
Yeah, I think that's just a phenomena of like the Netflix age where, you could go back and watch these old shows all the way through, and so people are watching it for the first time, and now it's just a thing where when you have a show that people like, people kind of expect a podcast to go along with it. I remember listening to the Breaking Bad podcast when it was out. Like every episode after Breaking Bad would come out, the showrunner would do the podcast with the editor and talk about it, which was really, really fun to listen to as a fan. So it makes sense they would do that again.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we've gone super long today, guys.
I kind of feel like that too. I have no idea when we started.
Yeah, I don't either, because we had a little bit of a longer setup to get the thing set up.
Yeah.
Back to the 3-person configuration.
You know, I had to take a camera down, but I measured. We're all 6 feet apart, so no one has to worry about that.
Unfortunately, no one has coughed or sneezed during this podcast.
Yeah.
Easy there.
Yeah.
Easy there.
They send you home.
That's a Mean Girls. She goes, I'm sick.
Oh, yeah. See, I knew you liked Mean Girls.
I'm not saying I'm not a fan, but
I saw you and I went, Mean Girls.
but I'm not.
Not at all.
No.
I feel just like every woman between the age of 25 and 35 is a fan of Mean Girls.
Yeah, I mean, it was a funny movie,
Yeah.
and it came out like at an age I was like around that high school or
Right.
kind of age. So
My wife loves that movie, and she just says it's just very relatable, for young women.
Yeah, that movie and Clueless are two.
I
My
love
wife
Clueless,
loves
yeah.
Clueless, but my wife really likes horror movies. So Heathers is one of her
Heathers.
best
Oh, yeah.
favorite movie. And I don't know. I did all
How's the
stories
color
there.
in these movies? High key lighting.
Well, and Clueless for sure.
I don't remember any of them, frankly.
Heathers is dark. It's like a suspense movie, but anyhow, I can't remember. I should know because I've seen them all quite a bit. But
Your wife likes them?
yeah, I'm not one to. I don't like reruns much. I don't. If I've seen a movie and I can remember the plot, I don't want to watch it. And
Yeah.
and so I have to have enough distance or whatever. But my wife is, on the other hand, she really likes watching stuff over again because it comforts her. And it's like, I know what's going to happen. I don't have to care as much, and I can still enjoy it. And that to me is like, well, I want to care about it. I want to care about every character because I want to be moved the way I was. I was happy to watch Hateful Eight, even though I love that movie, and I remember being really impactful to me. I couldn't quite remember how it all ended. I mean, I knew most of them they're all going to die, but I didn't remember how it all came undone. And I was like, oh, I was so excited to be surprised again.
Well, maybe you can go home and watch Scoobs again.
Scoobs, yeah. No, it'd be $20 because we only rented it.
Oh, that's right.
But yeah, Will Forte is the voice of Scooby-Doo.
Oh, he's got a good voice for cartoons.
Scoob.
All right, well, that's probably a good a signal for us to end it when we're talking about Scooby-Doo, I guess, right?
Scooby-Dooby-Doo.
Okay. All right, thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll see y'all next time. Thanks everyone for listening. For Chris Monlux, Haley Laplante, and everyone here at Videomaker, I'm Mike Wilhelm, and you've been listening to the Videomaker podcast. We'll catch you next time.